You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And I'm Dave Cossey.
And we are all your hosts for the show tonight because, you know, if Dave's on, it's got to be the night before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Eve.
It was the night before Thanksgiving.
It was the night before Thanksgiving. I always thought that the show would actually be a lot more interesting if we had a third host. But hey, we've actually got Dave. We always get Dave for the day before Thanksgiving. Sometimes I know Dave will bring you in for other little special shows here and there throughout the year.
Yep.
But definitely the day before Thanksgiving. So today we have kind of a special show for you guys. Now, anybody that's followed us over the last, I don't know how many ever years, probably the last 2 years, I think, that we've been doing this. Anybody that's been watching this a while knows, first year that we brought Dave on and did this whole little Thanksgiving special thing, we reviewed the dreaded holiday special. So if you guys, you know what, I might even put a link to that in this description because that was just pure gold. That was just pure comedy gold, man. I mean, to actually watch that with you guys was incredible. And still, it's funny. Like, sometimes I'll go back and watch it, and I'm like, wow, we were on that night. So,
good.
So, yeah, every once in a while, like, and you even said before we went on, Dave, that you sent one of your friends over there to it, thinking that would probably be, it's like, look, if you're going to watch the holiday special, that's probably the best way to do it, is watch the reaction.
Exactly. Because it's like sitting around with your buddies watching it, you know?
Yeah.
And because listen, when we did that reaction show, I told you guys I tried to watch that by myself, and it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's funny, like, over the years. Well, keep in mind that when I was actually a kid, right? That was on TV when I was a kid. I'd seen the original Star Wars, like everybody knows, back in '77. The next year that thing came on. I was really excited to watch it. As an 8-year-old kid, I was great. Because again, you know, they didn't have home video back then or anything like that. So you're actually seeing movie theater characters on the small screen, which is a really big deal back then. But then, you know, you try to watch it later, you're like, well, this is just horrible.
Yeah, you need like LSD to get through it.
You know, that would be interesting, actually. Not that I'm an advocate for drug use, but
hey man, let's get some and let's just do it here, and then
now that would be the holiday special reaction part 2. Let's all drop some sort of hallucinogenic drug and then react to it.
Wow,
we'll have to definitely put some parental discretion.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that might be one that we would have to pre-record because I think we would all want to watch that, like, once we sobered up. Like, yeah, let's just make sure that, you know, everything was cool.
Oh man, that's almost worth doing. Just talking about it.
I know. I mean, I really hate to admit this, but I'm sitting there half seriously entertaining that idea in my head. Like,
now the question is, where do we get it from? But anyway.
Well, hey, I mean, people, the amount that we're laughing right now, people probably think we're on something.
That's true.
We're just on a natural pre-Thanksgiving high, everybody. But, you know, it's funny because, and we had been talking to everybody, too, about, hey, you know, what should we react to this year? And last year we did Family Guy's Blue Harvest. And YouTube was not too happy with us for that one. In fact, if I remember correctly, they shut us down in the middle of the stream because we had a bunch of people chatting in, and then it just stopped. And then we brought it back, I think, briefly, and then, you know, they were warning us, like, and then it just went out for good, and we had to pre-record the rest of it. And that one's available on our Vimeo site. That we had the link to it, so people actually went back and watched it. And that's why this year we were going to do something Dark Side, which is a second video in that Family Guy Star Wars spoof trilogy. But, you know, I was sitting there thinking about it, even up until like last week, and I'm just going, if we try to do that, it's like all it's going to happen is the same thing's going to happen again, and it just probably isn't. And yeah, we probably could have avoided it by, you watch a little, pause it, talk about it. I don't know. It just seemed like it was just kind of a lost cause. And then we had the idea of maybe doing one of the fan films, like that really cool Darth Vader one. What's it called?
I
Like
like that one.
Shattered or something like that? Shards of the Past? Is that it?
I think so.
Shards of something.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
It's actually called Shards of something. We don't know what it is, but Shards of something. And then, of course, that,
Shards of the Past. Yeah,
Shards of the Past.
Shards of the Past.
All right, Shards of the Past. And it's a part 1, which implies that eventually, when they probably get enough money together, they're going to make a part 2. Which, yeah, that one was really good. So I thought, you know what, that might be worth reacting to. But, then it was just kind of like whatever. And then what happens? What happens? We just, this wonderful little nugget dropped in our laps. That's right. John Campea ends up getting on his show. And the headline of it was Kathleen Kennedy out of Lucasfilm. Now, you guys all know that there's rumors of Kathleen Kennedy being dismissed from Lucasfilm like every single week, right? Like, you almost can't turn on YouTube without somebody coming on saying Kathleen Kennedy's out of YouTube. But what actually makes this really compelling is the fact that, number one, it's Campea that's saying it. And John Campea is a pretty... I mean, some people think that he's a shill or whatever, which is kind of like people that are paid to, hawk certain stuff or whatever. So, but he's not. And he has very well-placed sources. And there's a couple of people that when Bob Iger... And I should probably back up and say that Bob Iger was brought in... He was brought back in as the chairman of Disney. He immediately fires Bob
Chapek.
Yeah. Who is his successor? Immediately starts reversing a lot of his decisions. And then during that time, when Campea was talking about that, he was like, well, Iger was actually one of the champions of Kathleen Kennedy. So it stood to reason that, hey, she's probably going to be safe. Well, he had said that, and he had, talked about that on a lot of different shows. And then a couple of people that were inside Disney and Lucasfilm, who were friends of John's, contacted him and was like, yeah, that's not entirely accurate. And there was a couple of people that actually said that. And so now, it's looking like it's not going to happen right away. They're probably going to do it after the new Indiana Jones movie comes out next May or March or whenever it's supposed to be released. But that very shortly after that, she could be bounced out of there. So when this actually popped up, it was sort of a no-brainer because I thought, what a great roundtable discussion this would be, since we have 3 people on this show today, about, well, there's just so many things, right? You can talk about, number one, what does this mean in the short term? What does this mean in the long term? How is it going to affect the franchise? Who's going to take her place? Did she really mess up that bad? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can go. So I would say maybe... Well, right out the gate, maybe you guys can just start weighing in on what you think of this whole thing and, what you think that means for the whole franchise. Go ahead, Dave. You're the middle Brady Bunch in this particular look, so.
So, I know that there's, it's like a popular opinion, right, to blame Kennedy for things that they don't like about the Lucasfilm brand, right? The franchises that she quote unquote ruined because of her lack of leadership or supposed. But it just makes me wonder, with the things that people didn't like, what was her actual role in all of that, right? Because I was looking I did some, preliminary Wikipedia research, just looking at what her film credits were, basically. And she really, got her producer start on E.T. And I'm like, okay, what she got a producer credit. What did she actually do? And, there's little things on Wikipedia that's like, oh yeah, she basically acted as Spielberg's secretary and took notes. Okay, that gets you a producer credit? Wow, okay. And with all of the other things where she has a producer credit, it makes me wonder what her role is, and then, or what it actually was. Then on the flip side, after she became, the main person at Lucasfilm, what was her actual role in the things that that a lot of people think were failures, right? And the biggest thing, I guess, that people talk about in that vein is the sequel trilogy, and how they didn't like how the story unfolded, and there were just bad decisions made in certain areas, and all of that. Solo is another popular thing to bash, right? So I guess that's my question. What was her actual role in all of that? What part did she play? And was it actually her? That's what I don't know. I guess I'm not in the know in as far as that goes, but it's a popular opinion to kind of blame her for those types of things.
All right, so you're kind of looking at her role overall, and it's interesting because one of the things that I've always said is, well, she's got this reputation. She's an amazing producer. Over and over, I've said that's where she should stay. And as a studio head, that's where she really falls flat. But right. You do bring up a good point, though, and this is something that we never really did. I mean, we never really went back and said, well, okay, it's well known in Hollywood that you can get a producer credit for anything. It's whenever people really want to be a part of something, some investor or something like that. Oh yeah, we'll give you a producer credit, or somebody will always say that, and it's right. It's one of those things that, yeah, it never even occurred to me, and I don't know, Daryl, if it occurred to you, but I never really thought about actually investigating, well, what did she do on all these films that she produced? So with that, Daryl, what do you think? What about you?
Well, I believe that she's well known, and I guess because she's well known in the industry as a great producer. So outside, I can't speak intelligently to all the producing that she's done, on all these various different movies and films. However, industry wise, she's well regarded. So obviously she's done something, considerable
there's some value, in other words, right?
Exactly. So I'm basing it on that. Like, okay, it's how they heralds you as a marvelous, great producer. Well, what the heck is happening then? So that's why I guess I had the stance on her. It's like, okay, well, maybe as a producer, you're amazing. Maybe as, like you said, a studio head, it's the same. And I kind of liken it once again to sports. You may be a great coach, but that doesn't make you a great general manager. And I think she's may have been a great coach as a producer in that regard, but just now you wanted to move her up to general manager's position, where she's now the studio head of Lucasfilm. And that's just not really what's best. At times you need to bring in people who are good at running companies to that magnitude. And that's sorely lacking in Lucasfilm.
Yeah. And I think that also, Dave, to your point, when you were saying, well, okay, how much does she actually have to do with a lot of this stuff? Where I think, and the sequel trilogy pretty much is it, but even when you look at some of the other things, and first let's start out by saying that, every one of the movies that she's had to be a part of, at least in the Lucasfilm realm, have all made over $1 billion. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of, you
Right.
know, yeah, on one hand, you kind of look at it like, okay, the fans will all say she failed from a creative standpoint, but from a financial and marketing standpoint, so far successful.
But that then begs the question: if she failed from the creative standpoint, was she actually the one who failed from the creative standpoint? Because if she were just the studio head controlling, the purse strings and getting all of these other teams on the same page toward a common goal, like all of the other business units plus the artistic units, then was it actually her that was this lack of creativity type of thing, or was that somebody else? Did she delegate that to somebody else and that person kind of dropped the ball? That's what I would like to know.
Well, I mean, I think that unfortunately that's the problem. I mean, Daryl and I talk about
Right.
all the time about how she micromanages. She lets these people like Lord and Miller in the case of Star Wars. The traditional thing is, it really started with Rogue One. Because that was the first time, because Force Awakens had come out, they were making Rogue One. Gareth Edwards was the director of Rogue One. And it was like they were 70-80% into the film, and then she decided she didn't like a bunch of stuff. So she was going to fire Gareth Edwards, actually. But she sort of kept him on and brought in Tony Gilroy, who's the current showrunner of Andor, which is why he's the current showrunner of Andor. And Gilroy ended up going in and punching up a lot of Rogue One scenes. That's the reason why, and Daryl and I talk about this all the time, one of the downsides of Rogue One was that movie is very different from what we saw in the trailer. A lot of people are like, wait, where are all the scenes that I saw in the trailer? Like, none of them are in the movie. And that's
where was that TIE fighter that was supposed to come down while Jin was on the antenna?
Exactly. Exactly.
I really wanted to see that.
But
I was waiting for that moment.
Yeah.
So I guess the organization then of Lucasfilm is, if the buck stops with her with creativity and creative license, then yes, then she would be to blame for the things creatively that people didn't like. But if she put that, if that was somebody else's bag, then I would more likely point to that somebody else. So, but it kind of sounds like what you're saying is that yeah, the creative license stopped with her.
Well, I will say this. I think what it is overall leadership. All right. And I'm going back to my,
Yes.
sports analogy. When you're the general manager, it's like, okay, you hire your coaches, you hire, all these
Right.
people. You're part of the draft process as far as like, okay, what players do we need to make our team successful? What's our 5-year plan looking down the road? Like, all right, we're in a rebuilding phase. Okay, cool. And what I feel like this is, for us, Eric, Dave, and myself, we're all based in Detroit, Michigan. So bear with me. We're like the Lions.
Oh no.
Right?
Oh no, you're going to turn it into a Lions podcast.
Well, they do have a game tomorrow.
They do. Perfectly. They've been on a roll lately, so hopefully that's good things for Lucasfilm.
Hey,
as well.
they're number 2 in the conference, aren't they? And they're
Peyton Manning and Jeff Daniels broke the curse. That bathtub in the end zone.
But here's the thing, though. It's
welcome to Sports Talk.
Right. So the financial strings, like, okay, we talked about, okay, all her movies grossed $1 billion. All right, that's great because you have loyalists. Like, people are just loyal to Star Wars. So that's going to be, and the brand of, Star Wars carries. So it's no different than like how with us being die hard Lions fans who play games all the time, just because it's our, see the win. So financially, the Lions teams is doing well, but the performance hasn't been squat, and that's what's been happening with Lucasfilm here. And this is why I say it stops with her, because it starts and stops with her because you're the leadership. And I could see if it was just like, okay, Rogue One, all right, if it was just that. But you've had issues with Rogue One, you had issues with Solo, you've had issues with the whole sequel trilogy. Like, so it's a consistent thing, and she's been at the helm the whole time. So either you're bad at bringing in good people, or you're just letting good people do bad things. I don't know what it is, because like Ryan Johnson, like you let him have free reign over, the last guy, and that was the one that polarized the whole entire.
I was going to bring that up, actually. It's like the one person you leave totally alone is the one that just divides the entire fan base.
And when you have your star, I mean, who made Star Wars, Mark Hamill, like complaining, like, okay, Luke Skywalker wouldn't, like, okay, here's a guy who's been doing this since 77. Like, you think you might want to listen to the guy, just a little bit. I mean, he knows how things are supposed to go. And when you have your key actors and actresses kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of it's a bad look when you're firing directors halfway through, and then you bring in like, oh, okay, well, let's just bring Ron Howard in to finish, Solo, or let's bring in this person to, okay, well, J.J. Abrams, we're afraid that Rise of Skywalker, so let's bring Abrams back to do that and get rid of, Colin. It's just like, these are your decisions. Like, you're the executive producer. I could see if you're just like, a creative producer, but you're the executive producer. The buck stops with you. So at some point, you have to just basically own up to the fact that it's like, okay, either I brought in the wrong people and they just didn't do what I thought they could do, and maybe I need to leave that task to someone else who's better qualified in finding talent. Or maybe these people just set me up for a fall. I don't know, but it all revolves around her, though. So that's why I really don't have any lenience for her. Mm-hmm.
Right. Or maybe she micromanaged so much that it kind of squashed their creativity. Right.
Too. That's what I think.
That could be it as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and here's the thing, and you bring up Solo. Solo was the next movie I was going to bring up, because that, to me, was probably the most disastrous, right? Because they had Lord and Miller in there. And look, there was no mystery. Lord and Miller are the guys behind the Lego films and a couple other, like, kind of raunchy comedy type things, right? So you know these guys are not maybe going to approach it seriously. She not only hires them because they laid out the concept that, look, this is what we're planning on doing, and she signed off on it. Does she wait till 20%, 30, 40% of the movie? No, she waits till 80% of the movie is done and goes, I don't like the direction you guys are going. It's like, direction, you're almost done.
You knew the direction.
Right.
You knew the direction
when
we started.
So then she does kind of what she did with Rogue One. She brings in Ron Howard to go in there, reshoot a ton of scenes. Now, it does turn out, because I was watching something not too long ago about, basically, there was some video, I think, on YouTube that I was watching where they outlined all the Lord and Miller scenes that remained in Solo, and there's quite a bit of them. There's more than you would think. But, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you know what's going on. It's almost Independence Day. You knew then. and basically you choose to do this. This is just really bad decision making, and it's making the fans go, what are you doing?
Yeah, and when I heard that as well, that Ron Howard was being brought in, that I kind of scratched my head. Did that seem like a weird choice to you? I don't know. It seemed like a weird choice to me. I mean, Ron Howard's a great guy. He's a great director, very creative, but really, for a Star Wars? I don't know.
I'll tell you what, it did make sense to me. It made sense to me because of the type of he could capture the vibe, and he also directed Willow. Everybody forgets that, which is another Lucasfilm property.
Yeah. Yep.
And that very much had that Star Wars-ish vibe. But I mean, I know what you mean, though, in the sense of, you know, I don't remember, because there was a point in the 90s where Ron Howard was really hot. He was directing all these movies, Backdraft and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, he still does stuff, but he's just sort of on the sidelines almost. So it was weird that his name just came up first, you know. But I mean, when you really stop and put it into a certain context, it does make sense. But, you know, why not just hire him in the first place?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. I think they tried to find someone seasoned enough had enough experience to go back in
And fix it,
and
yeah.
fix it.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You need those veteran chops to really make that happen. But my thing is looking at, like I said, just all the different, you know, missteps that she's done, and I sticking on the Solo thing. The marketing for Solo, that's another big one. It's like, why
Oh,
did you
yeah.
wait so long to market the movie?
Like 2 weeks before
You know,
it
man,
came
it's
out or
two-
something.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
I agree
it's
with
like
you.
a month, baby. Like now we starting to see, because I remember we were trying to do shows and we're like, man, we haven't even seen the trailer for this stupid thing
Yeah,
yet. And
that's
it's like,
right. It's like, well, it's coming
what
out
the
next
heck?
month. I mean, you know, it's right.
Right.
We got to get
Any
one at
day
some
now.
point. Yeah, right. You know, it's
Yeah,
like, what are you
exactly.
doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing?
And that's why it scares when people hear reshoots. I mean, even though all movies have that in their budget to do, you know, reshoots and stuff, and it's in contracts and everybody knows that, but when it becomes publicized so much like that, it does raise the alarm for people, because now you're like, okay, well, is something wrong with what happened? You know, and then now you're starting to hear all these different things. And even, you know, the actresses, John Boyega, I mean, just people being so disenfranchised with the actual brand of Star Wars or Lucasfilm has, you know, it's just tainted a lot of different people, you know, and that's, once again, it falls under her watch. And whether it's directly her fault or indirectly, like, she hasn't done enough to kind of grab the reins and pull this thing in and say, okay, you know what? I'm cleaning house. I need to do this. I'm gonna right this ship back on the right course and put us back on the right trajectory. And that just hasn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's one of those things that, again, you know, you bring up reshoots being the most mundane, normal thing in a lot of films, and they are. Big budget movies will actually have a line item for reshoots. They make the actors available for reshoots, and it doesn't even matter how big it is. I remember Halloween 2, the original, the John Carpenter one. You know, one of the problems was they had to have Jamie Lee Curtis wear a wig because she had cut her hair short for another movie, and they needed to do a bunch of reshoots and have her come back. And, you know, so it's a normal thing. But I think where people get a little concerned is, okay, if you're reshooting, you know, a bunch of scenes, that's one thing. When you're shooting a lot of the film, that's a big deal, because now you're going, okay, number one, did you not, I don't know, read the script? And again, I understand that a movie could be different when you're reading the script, when you actually come up with the challenges and things like that, and they have to alter certain scenes. Big example, I brought this up before, the movie Jaws. The shark wasn't working. It's like, well, what do we do? Well, we got these barrels. Let's just shoot them with barrels, so that way it's a lot easier to just have a bunch of barrels pop up. And it ended up adding suspense and improving the overall film, because when you don't see the shark, it's a little bit more terrifying. So there is that. But, you know, when you're actually looking at a movie and going, oh, it's not working, we're going to redo a big chunk of it. It really is one of those things, especially when you juxtapose this with Lucas, who basically had a vision and stuck to it and then put the film out. You know, it's like and these guys are getting it, and it's like they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
another thing about
Go ahead, Dave.
reshoots too. Yeah, another thing about reshoots is that when you hear that, you know, just the amount of reshoots that happening as a fan, that's when the irresponsible speculation starts. So,
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, it's once again, and that's the problem kind of with Star Wars as well, is that when you have it coming from the mind of one person, I say this all the time, it all comes from the mind of George Lucas. And if you really don't understand what Star Wars is, and that's why I mentioned it several times, but if you haven't had a chance to do yourself a favor and really watch, I think it's called The Gallery on Disney Plus under the Star Wars brand, because you hear Dave Filoni, who's the basically pretty much the Padawan or heir apprentice to George Lucas himself, actually dissect what Star Wars actually is. And that's what you really need to understand. In order to create, you have to understand what you're creating and what goes into it. This being the holiday season, okay, when you want to make some sort of stuffing dressing, you need to know what goes into. You just can't just put, well, this looks good and just try that. Like, no, it it has certain things in it that needs to make it cohesive and to make it taste good, and that's what it has to be for fans. Yes, we wanted the sequel trilogy to be great. We want them to push the envelope a little bit, but you can't do it too much. Like Ryan Johnson tried to, he tried to go too far with it, and then you have people like J.J. Abrams who were playing a little closer to the vest. Like, all right, let me just keep it safe here, and you know, do that. So you didn't get what you really wanted from the sequel trilogy, and then here comes Dave Filoni knocking it out the park with the Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Like, boom, Mandalorian comes
Yep.
out, huge success, everyone loves it. Why? Because Dave Filoni gets Star Wars. He and Jon Favreau understand.
Yeah.
Now, to take off on your culinary analogy there, Daryl. So, what Star Wars should be is baking. Baking is very scientific. You have to follow the recipe in order for it to turn out right. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of what's been going on, Mandalorian aside, and Andor aside as well, but they've been cooking, right? Cooking, you can take a piece of meat and smell a few spices and say, oh, that'll be good on this. Throw it on there, cook that thing up, and some people will like it and some people won't. But that's the difference between cooking and baking, right? Cooking is less scientific than baking is. Baking has to be pretty precise. Now, J.J. Abrams, he had to come back and bring out comfort food for everybody, right? So he cooked up some comfort food, and that's what kind of brought everybody back.
Dave, see, and
Nice
this is
one.
why, but this is just to continue the analogy. This is why we need to be baked the next time we see the holiday special and review it, right? Because
Exactly.
it's about baking. We have a chat. Basically, 06 Merc says, "Get her out of here." I waited until season 2 of The Mandalorian was over to get it on DVD and watch. Any of these streaming services are a joke. Well, you know what though?
Well,
Here's and I was
Tell
actually
us how
going
you really feel.
well, and I'll be
Right.
honest, right? So now it's indicating some issues with The Mandalorian, but I think The Mandalorian, there's certain episodes maybe you can point to that were maybe not as good overall, and I think the three of us pretty much agreed The Mandalorian was a good, consistent show. But I will say this though, where this person definitely has a point, is how wildly inconsistent the other streaming shows are.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I liked them, it's like there's just been inconsistency once again, because if Filoni and Favreau have direct involvement in it, it's probably going to be at least okay. And then what's ironic is Bryce Dallas Howard, who's Ron Howard's daughter, is actually one of the best directors. Like, she's the one that I would love to direct a film. Hands down. Wow.
It's funny that you bring
Go
that
ahead.
up, because there's actually and I just saw this. I think the next Star Wars film is slated for to ramp up in the next
Next what? You dropped out there for a sec.
On the next 5 years.
5 more years?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is coming from Star Wars News .net.
Oh yeah, StarWarsNewsNet.com. Okay, they're pretty reliable. So,
yeah.
Just a couple of things before we continue. Ronaldo's here. He says, "Hey everyone, late to the party, but I'm here."
Hey, Ronaldo.
And then David, Dave, you remember Ronaldo? David basically says Gina should never have been fired.
Yes, Gina Carano.
Yeah, that's another good point too. Yeah. I like the fact that everybody now. Thank you guys for starting to chat here. I mean, not that we don't all enjoy talking to each other, we do, but it is nice when when you're doing a live show, if you get live chat. So feel free to keep them coming because that's what this is. It's a big table in our round table discussion. Ronaldo. And basically, Daryl, since you're the one that found this article or whatever, you're going to have to address it. He says, is the next one Taika's?
Taika Waititi. So, let's see. It says, as it stands, and despite recent cancellations, we know of at least 3 different films being in active development. Taika Waititi's line, gestating project, a supposedly post Rise of Skywalker standalone created by Damon Lindelof and Kevin Feige and Michael Waldron's secret film, which could be the same that Sean Levy has joined. So, and then if it could be another one if they decide to reactivate Rogue Squadron. So they haven't exactly said which one was going to be released first, but the ones that have been known to be pending.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, and again, this is another area where I think Kathleen has really kind of dropped the ball. Because again, we're talking about her leadership. Nothing to do with her skills as a producer, nothing to do with some of the other stuff, but she seems to shift a lot. You remember the big announcement that we got, I don't know, a year ago or something? Was it that at D23 or something where they were announcing Lando and all this? Now, on the Disney Plus side, I will admit, yes, they do have the Acolytes in production, Ahsoka's in production. We've gotten some trailers from that and everything. So they're pretty much putting along on the thing, right? So Skeleton Crew, we've got some new news on that one within the last 4 or 5 months. And really, Lando is the only TV thing that's the only project that we didn't really get any news on. But the film side of it.
That was the other one.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's on. I think that's on Disney Plus right now, actually.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Which one?
It's like Droids, not the 1980s,
okay.
Not that one.
No.
Although that is actually on there too. That is on there too. And
David's getting holiday special flashbacks.
Yeah. Well, and we're gonna have to drop some hallucinogenics and review that one too. Kind of liking this idea. But
so go ahead, Eric.
No, I'm defaulting to my middle Brady over here.
I just wanted to dig into a comment that you made a few minutes ago about some of the streaming shows being not so good. I don't know if you called them a disaster, but not so good. I'm curious to know what those are in your opinion.
Well, for me personally, I wouldn't call any of them a disaster or really bad. I mean, I can understand people's disappointment with them. Like, for instance, Boba Fett. The Boba Fett one, I thought was good, but they really took the Boba Fett character and, I mean, it's fine to demystify him. But if you look at the way they portrayed him in the Mandalorian episodes versus the way he was portrayed in the book of Boba Fett, where he couldn't seem to make any kind of a decision, he was, almost a pacifist. It was like, what are you doing? This isn't Boba Fett. And, some of the direction of the episodes, that whole stupid thing where he's chasing a little droid around the kitchen, that look like something out of a Disney film, like Ratatouille or something. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
But again, not really being a Star Wars apologist, but what I can do that a lot of fans don't seem to be able to do is I can look past a lot of the execution and focus on the story. And that's the thing. I thought the stories were good. Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's another one that, although I loved Obi-Wan, you could tell that was definitely on a television budget. And that hurt it tremendously. And they really should have done the same thing with Obi-Wan that they did with Andor. You know, take a little bit more time, especially because the Obi-Wan series really fills in a lot of serious canon. I mean, that's a really vital, important series as far as the canon of the entire franchise. And to basically shoot it on a television budget was, in my opinion, a misstep.
Well, most of their budget went to probably Ewan McGregor and Space Jimmy Smits, right?
well, not only that, but it probably also went to the AI that they needed to recreate Vader's voice.
Oh yeah,
which by the way, I applauded them for. First of all, I applauded James Earl Jones.
Sounded good. I got to tell you, it sounded good.
It was really good, and it sounded like the episode 4 version of James Earl Jones. Because when he was croaking out those lines in Rogue One, I mean...
that was a little hard to listen to.
It was. And it's like, dude, this is supposed to take place before A New Hope, and he sounds like he's 90, because he is 90. That's the thing. You can't blame James Earl Jones, and look, I'd rather have that than some imitator, because you want the actual guy doing the voice, but it's... even James himself is kind of like, I gave him permission to do the AI thing because I'm getting a little older, and it's probably hard for him to do this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Rogue One, you just pass it off as Vader having trouble with his suit. The vocabulary wasn't actually working.
Well,
right.
That's what we're all good at as far as Star Wars fans go, right? We can find an in-universe explanation for anything.
Yep.
We've been trained.
You gotta think about it though. When Krennic shows up, Vader's in the tub, man. You gotta hurry up and get out and get dressed. He's Russian, man. He's he's trying to get back.
I didn't adjust the base. Hold on.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, wait, the filter. I got the old man filter on. Hold on, it's like...
Yeah, exactly. He didn't have his A1, doing the comm for him. It was just it's a problem.
There are some issues. All right.
You can't.
Not only are there
issues. You can't rush
issues.
him off the top.
There's some chats too. A bunch of them came in. David said, "Well, I think it's a good decision to fire her. I don't think they've learned from their lesson, though. It's a good point. She turned me off with her 'The Force is female' shirt. Wearing that proves she doesn't understand." I miss that. I didn't see that. If that's the thing, the whole feminism stuff, the woke agenda, all that stuff penetrating what is otherwise a timeless classic. As soon as you bring that kind of stuff into it, you're destroying the timelessness of it. And the problem is they're shoehorning it in.
Absolutely. And that goes back to, Dave's wonderful, analogy of baking, right? Versus cooking. It's like, oh, okay, well, let's just throw some little woke agenda here. Let's throw some, feministic, stuff here. And, this will appeal to everyone's palate, right? And it's like, no, it's like if you follow the recipe and just tell timeless stories, which has, like Dave said, it's science. It's like there's story tropes and there's reasons why for years, like you go to college and you study like literature and you have to sit in those halls, like they have formats from Shakespeare on down. Like it's been done since the beginning of time. So it's like, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? And just take what's done and just put your own flavor or spin on it, but it's there. And I think that's the problem that a lot of the Star films, TV shows are starting to see is now we have to try to like you said, Eric, shoehorned a bunch of this political crap into it, and it's like, look, we don't need it. I want my Star Wars. That's
Star
it.
Wars. Now here's the thing, because this is funny.
No, well, let's go back for a second. Political things. I mean, Star Wars has always had political undertones, right? But
Oh yeah, definitely.
not necessarily modern political undertones.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's where, when you're bringing in all of the modern things that people have really strong opinions about, then that's where you're going to lose some people. So, yeah,
it's like you said though. It was more allegory than specific.
Right.
You know, it's things like, a primitive culture triumphing over a technological society. It's the evils of fascism. It's kind of like these wide. It's political, but it's a wide sweeping kind of a thing. It's not super specific to a time period. It's, once again, even the political allegories are timeless. But I had to address this because the three of us were talking about this before the show, and Ronaldo brings it up, and he says, and I quote, "Am I the only one that thinks that Dave looks like Obi-Wan?"
He's a stunt double.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, it's not Dave.
Has grown so far that
yeah, we got Ewan McGregor here. Now we can actually reveal the truth.
We couldn't afford Ewan, but we got a stunt double.
Yeah, exactly.
That was good.
That was good.
I work on that all the time,
Yeah, well, hey, if you're gonna have the look, you got to adopt the attitude and everything, right?
That needs to be my Halloween costume forever and a day. But
forever, yeah.
I haven't gotten around to it yet. But
well, you're 80% there. You're 80% there. He also says,
a girl follow after you.
Is there a date for the Acolyte? I don't know. It depends on the type that she's interested in. I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can. Yeah, all right, I'll stop.
I mean, is she hot? No, anyway.
So
no, they haven't given a specific date for Acolyte, but it's supposed to, if I recall correctly, it's supposed to come out mid-year, like maybe around August,
something like that. August, September. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember when we did last year, we did all the projects that were coming out in 2022, and to say we were a little off. But again, this goes into precisely what we're talking about tonight, and that is the woman that's there. She's to blame for pretty much what we're going through right now, because she basically said that all this stuff was coming out. And so, Daryl and I, being Star Wars fans / content creators, took her at her word, never do that again, and, spewed it out after D23, I think it was, or whenever she made all those announcements. I'm like, yeah, here's all this stuff that's coming out. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, just kidding. This has been delayed and moved. And, so it's kind of like, okay. But I think you're right. I think because, look, The Acolyte has started production. I think it started last month. So we even showed it on one of our shows recently, where we had some set pieces. They were just building it. I mean, wasn't anything profound. It was just like a nondescript building, and I mean, it could have been down the street from
Walmart.
Right? Exactly. I mean, but trust me, it was. At least that's what the article said. All right, so Ronaldo goes on to say, "I loved Obi-Wan." Dave, thanks you. And enjoyed Boba Fett. I don't think they've been bad. I do think Obi-Wan should have been a movie.
I think Obi-Wan should have gotten more episodes.
Yes.
They should have drawn it out it out just a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the last I think it was the last 2 episodes seemed kind of rushed to me.
Yeah, I think that Obi-Wan, I mean, essentially it was a movie. I mean, granted, it's like a 6-hour movie if you really look at it, so kind of in totality. But the problem is that um there was some character development that went lacking. Like, for example, the Inquisitor, Fifth Sister, I think that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there should have been more with her. Um and I think that went lacking. I think there were some things like you said, I agree with you, Dave, uh where some things were a little bit rushed, like that whole scene where, like, okay, she knew exactly where Luke was, and just popped up at the the Lars resident. I mean, at the Lars household, but
The farm.
the farm, yeah. And it's just that whole thing just seemed a little bit rushed to me. So, and that's another thing. What happens with Star Wars lately? The pacing, right? Eric and I talk about this a lot. Pacing on a lot of these shows are sometimes what throws things off too,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like they're trying to cram a bunch of, either they're trying to cram too much into an episode, or they let certain episodes not have enough punch to them to make you want to watch, okay, the next one. That sometimes that Andor kind of suffer from that in moments. So I think that's just, once again, the creativity that isn't really addressed. And I think that's, once again, a Kathleen Kennedy point, because if you're the one who has to sign off on this, like when it's all said and done, you have to write your name on it and say, like, okay, I've cleared this. So if you've written your name, then apparently you think it's fine. And so at that point, you being the executive producer or the head of Lucasfilm, if you're signing off on it, we have to take it. Okay, well, you thought it was good, and then everybody else thinks it's crap. Well, what does that say about you? So,
Well, not only that, but I mean, some of the other stuff in Obi-Wan, it's like, it was really easy for her to find Luke. It's like, come on now. I mean, if it was that easy, then the Empire would have found him a long time ago. And then you have, like, Obi-Wan practically, in that hologram with Bail Organa or whatever, in the middle of this whole thing, like, oh, yeah, the kid's safe. And it's like, how about using a little coded language, maybe? If the whole fate of the universe depends on this guy, maybe not put that out there on a non-secured comm and in the middle of, I forgot where they were, but wherever it was, I remember it might have even been when they were on that Star Destroyer or something. I'm like, what are you doing? It's, again, and these are the kinds of decisions that, once again, it's lazy writing. It's people not respecting the entire franchise, the continuity, just doing what they want for the moment, cooking instead of baking. We're going to keep coming back to this, right? Because baking is it's a slow thing. You got to do a lot more prep in baking. You can't just turn the heat on high and throw the thing in the pan, and you have to know what temperature it is. I mean, one of the things that's really funny, I've gotten totally addicted, and I have been for a while, but I'm ready to admit it now. I've gotten totally addicted to the Great British Baking Show or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
Dude.
Love it.
Love that show. And, I used to watch it with my girlfriend a lot, and then I started watching it, gasp, when she wasn't around. And it's just...
That's a cardinal sin, by the way. That's a cardinal sin.
Let me help you. Let me help you with that one. That's
something I probably shouldn't be admitting, and something that's recorded and going to last forever. But hey,
just like Bail Organa shouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
language,
that's it, man. That's what it is. I'm trying to illustrate my point in real terms, right? It's a parable, if you will. But I mean, basically, it's one of those things where even when you think of baking, you don't realize everything that goes into it. But when you watch that show, you're like, man, every little, decision will affect something 2 or 3 steps down the line. And that's what happens in Star Wars. People don't understand that. It's like you can't do that. Let's see.
This kind of all goes back to why I wish they had brought in, and I'm not sure if they actually did, but I wish they had brought in some of the now Legends authors
I know.
to come to consult, right? Especially on the sequel trilogy. Timothy Zahn, come on.
Why not just do his trilogy?
That's
Fix the
right.
little things that maybe were a little weird.
He wrote an awesome trilogy and then some. Other authors come to mind too. Kevin J. Anderson, Barbara Hambly. They all wrote amazing novels that were in the sequel era. Come on, use them.
Exactly.
The content is already there. Consult with them. I don't know.
Yeah,
right,
well, and I mean,
now.
but that's true, because this is another thing. I'm glad you brought it up, because now you don't even have to do the Legends authors, because actually one of the greatest authors who even eclipses Zahn is Claudia Gray.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And get Claudia Gray, get Timothy Zahn, get what's that guy? James Luceno.
Yep. He did great stuff too.
Yeah, and he did stuff in Legends as well. But again, it's like you have these guys who are really good storytellers. Why not just use them? That's the thing.
Right.
All right. Let me get to some more of these chats. Because again, they're coming in. Ronaldo says, to be fair with Boba Fett, saw the behind the scenes, and now I could say that I understand what Favreau and Filoni wanted to do. This is funny, because this is what happens to me sometimes if I see interviews. Like, I'll listen to some album or something, right? And I'm like, oh, this is terrible, this is horrible, whatever. But then I start watching the interviews with the artists that make it, right? And then you listen to it again, and now you're all into it because you understand what they were going for, what their intent was. It almost colors the way that you hear the album. And I think in a lot of ways, the same thing definitely happens with movies. When the people who are making it get really excited and, they're telling you, oh, this is what we want to do and all that, now you start to see that in the product, which, again, is more emotional and a bit disingenuous, because your first instinct was purely unbiased, right? You're just taking it for its merit. Second one, well, now you're allowing this other thing to color it in.
Now, yeah. I've got to admit, I haven't watched the behind the scenes for Boba Fett.
Me neither.
So I'm curious about that now, and going back to a comment that you made, Eric, a while ago about Boba Fett and how the decisions of the character and how it seemed like he was paralyzed to make a decision almost. That I was thinking at the time, I wonder if this is like a result of being in the Sarlacc for however long that he was.
Well, and
is that, I mean, because his quick decisions, led up to him getting knocked into the pit, basically. And so maybe he is purposely trying to take more deliberate actions, and at some point it's just like I'm not really sure where to go.
Well, and Daryl and I brought this up, actually, didn't we bring this up in the reviews? I think that was a theory that it was either us or somebody in the chat that did it, and then we talked about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the whole Boba Fett thing, and yeah, that was the part that I think that is, Eric, you probably can, speak to this as well. It's not so much even the decision making, although that's part of it. I think it was more so for me, I didn't fear Boba Fett.
Right.
Like, he was always one of those guys where it's like,
I feared him in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, exactly.
When he went to town on those stormtroopers, dude.
Because he was still mysterious. He was still mysterious, right? At that time. And he was still very ruthless at those moments, right? So that's where the fear comes in, because it's almost like you don't know what to expect. He's a little unhinged, right? So you're always on guard, type of thing around him. But yeah, and Daryl, you can keep going with what you were saying, but in the book of Boba Fett, I think that is a theory that I had even while watching it. I was like, okay, this is not the Boba Fett I expected, but maybe that's because he was in the Sarlacc. So I don't know.
Well, and that could have been their intent. Once again, one of the things that I've enjoyed about Star Wars lately, I know we've been kind of trashing on it a little bit, but one of the things I've actually been enjoyed about it is the humanization of certain characters, right? Even the Empire, because we've always looked at the Empire as, oh, they're bad, the rebels are good, yay, but. And this is even very prevalent in Andor, so you're getting to see what the Empire really, their mechanisms, like what they really believe, how they go about their business, and as well as the rebels trying to start something, and how hard it is to start a rebellion when you have all these obstacles that are in the way. So I love that aspect of it. The problem is, though, when you have certain characters about, like with Boba Fett, yes, I like the fact that they've humanized him somewhat, but in the process of them humanizing him, they also took away the essence of who he is. And my thing is, like, you can show him being benevolent on occasions, or somewhat like, okay, in certain situations, like, I don't have to be this ruthless guy all the time. But like when you have people that's like rising up with you, like that's when we want to see the Boba Fett that we know. Like, okay, look, I'm okay. It's kind of like a Game of Thrones thing. Like, okay, I'm a benevolent and I'm a just king, but don't push me type thing. That's what we kind of wanted from Boba Fett. It was like, all right, I'll be cool if you guys just kind of follow what I've got going on here. But if you step out of pocket, I have no problem in laying you down. That's the ruthlessness, and then you see that. And you really don't get the chance to see that, with Boba Fett. Now he's kind of playing like this, I don't know, like this grandpa that's he's okay.
Well, the way that you
weird.
described that whole, okay, I'm benevolent, but if you cross me, you're done. That's how he was in The Mandalorian.
Exactly.
Right. I thought that the way he was in The Mandalorian was perfect. It gave us a little bit more information about him, but yet it still maintained a little bit of his overall mystique, and yet he was cool, but then he was also ruthless. Whereas the Book of Boba Fett, we started to get almost the teddy bear thing. I mean, to the point where I'm even yelling at the TV, oh, just kill them. That's what you would do. Why are you taking this from them? Why are you letting this like little person? I mean, I get it. Okay, whatever. But it's like, you wouldn't do this.
Yeah. Too much time with the sand people, Tusken Raiders, that's
right. And that's another thing I was going to bring up, because Dave, as you brought up, okay, well, maybe, being in the Sarlacc pit, it's kind of like, well, maybe I was a little too rash. Maybe I need to start thinking about my decisions. But actually, if they had established that, I would have had less of a problem with it. Instead, they flash back even before with the whole, it's like he gets out of the Sarlacc and then he starts doing the whole sand people thing. And don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed that. I thought it went on a little too long, but I did enjoy that element of it. I loved the way that it sort of, made you understand the Tusken Raiders a little bit more, and you started, I mean, it was great. You took a character that everybody hated and you made him sympathetic in a way. And you understood
humanized them once again. Yeah.
Sure, right. You humanized them.
Right.
Or Tuskenized them. But, the thing is, but they did that, though, using the Sand People as an example. They did that all while maintaining their core character. And that was the problem that I had with the Book of Boba Fett. Now, Ronaldo says, also, I think Lucas didn't want the main characters to be killers or evil, and I think Dave and John continue with that tradition in Boba Fett. Well, kind of, but Lucas is the one that created Boba Fett to be ruthless and
Yeah,
you know. I mean, he's where we get that from.
And Vader had to tell him no disintegrations, right? So you know that he's known for it. So come on.
Yeah, that's why I love that scene. Like that's why I loved it was in The Mandalorian when he was popping those Jawas. Man, he was just like disintegrate. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, even though it wasn't Boba, it was Din, but it's like, okay, now you understand where the disintegration thing comes from. It's like, yeah, he could like vaporize those little things. So the fact that Boba Fett is like way more ruthless than that, and coming from like your dad is Django, so once again, it just, yeah, and that's one of those things. I'm like, okay, I can understand in certain regards and certain aspects. Yes, some of the TV series or the Disney Plus series shows has some lackluster things going on with it, but overall, I mean, they were pretty good. But when it comes to the films, which is where Kathleen Kennedy is really supposed to drive the spear through, she's not. She has a dull point.
Oh, I'm glad you brought Kathleen Kennedy back up because David kind of does that for us as well. He's like, I'm all for putting your friends on, right, Daryl? With that, what did Lucas see in her? It's like the Lions. How long are you allowed to
take L's before?
Yeah, to take L's before you replace. Right. So it's like, how long are you going to keep losing, and all this other stuff? How many times? How many chances? Like, look, she's your bud and all, but.
Well, that's the thing. It's like at the time when Lucas sold off, Lucasfilm to Disney, I think that was one of the things. Was like, okay, she had to be the spearhead, if you will, of the franchise, and it was cool because when she was with Lucas, I mean, no one could really argue with it because you could argue about some things with George, but at the end of the day, he's the creator of it all. Like, I get to control whatever I want because none of this would exist without me. So, but once he left and now she's left in charge, because at that time she was, she had been with him long enough to kind of, she could get done. But I just think creatively, Filoni is really where it's at. And then now, once he linked up with Favreau, once he got over to Disney, because Favreau has been one of the other guys over with Marvel. That's the guy. This is the same guy who plays Happy in all the Spider-Man movies, and so he's done Lion King. He's done a bunch of other.
He kicked it off. Iron Man. Iron Man was Favreau's.
Yeah, Iron Man.
Yep.
Yeah, Iron Man was Favreau. Yeah, exactly. The first Iron Man movie. So that's what I'm saying. Like he's a huge Star Wars fan. So the fact that you got a guy who's a huge Star Wars fan, that's a fantastic director. Filoni he comes from the animation side of things, so he hasn't done anything until Mandalorian, where it became live action. That was his first foray into live action.
And now he's getting, I could almost say even turn a movie over to him now because he's done enough stuff now that he's more or less proven
been around.
Himself. Yeah, he's been around. But again, the other thing that David has to understand too is that Lucas is no longer. It's not like, okay, well, she's your bud, but how long, before you dismiss her? It's like, well, Lucas basically appointed her and then bailed. So it's not his decision. It's Bob Iger's decision. Well, it is now. It was then. Mm-hmm. Now, you can make that argument maybe or make that case to Iger, but you can't. Because, again, every time she releases a movie, it makes over $1 billion and breaks records. It's like, well, what are you going to fire her based on? A few Star Wars fans didn't like the way she handled Luke Skywalker? I mean, come on. It's like, look, it's making money. I mean, okay, some of the hardcore fans are squawking, but butts are still being put in the seats. So, you're talking about like a bunch of L's. Where's L's? right? Where are they?
Well, I
It's a
think that
creative thing.
yeah, it's a creative thing, but and much like we've always said with the Lions, going to his point, until fans stop buying season tickets,
Yes.
until fans stop going
Yep.
to support,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to do anything different with the team because you have to hurt them in the pockets. But the problem is with
Exactly.
like Star Wars is like if you do it with Star Wars, okay, if fans aren't going to, if you get fans to stop caring about Star Wars, and then if you don't turn it around very quickly, no one's going to care anymore about it at all.
Well, the idea comes from, you're blowing a bunch of holes in the ship. Yeah, it's still floating because of momentum. But eventually, it's taken enough damage that it is going to sink. So even the infallible, unsinkable, invincible Star Wars franchise will eventually fall if it gets enough damage. Because, I said that almost as a devil's advocate thing, but look, I've been screaming that she should have been removed a long time ago. And it's not necessarily because of the fact that she's failing on paper, because she's not. But when the fans and everybody starts to lose faith, it's a long-term, it's the long game, as they say. She's winning the short game, but the long game is being damaged. So, yeah. Ronaldo says, I think John said something like, making him a bad guy doesn't work with Star Wars. We're talking about Boba Fett. I don't agree with him, but I get it. He kind of was. He wasn't really a bad guy. It's probably more like an anti-hero, maybe.
Yeah, anti-hero.
Let
me ask you guys this question. So, if what they say is true, which I can see it being reasonable, right? So right now we have a bunch of Disney Plus series Star Wars shows that are, we have Bad Batch, we have Ahsoka coming up, season 3 of Mandalorian is still coming up, The Acolyte. So if those series are successful, if they take 5 years to make another Star Wars film, how important is that film going to be to the franchise?
Dave, you want to tackle that one first?
That's kind of a loaded question, but I think it's going to be hugely important because, so on the streaming service, they get paid by subscribers, and
right.
I don't know how many new subscribers Disney Plus has on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, but those that are with, the only way that they can gauge our involvement in the streaming shows is to see how many times a certain show was watched, or it's all a numbers game there. That's not really money at that point, because the money's already there because of the subscription, and you get all this other content with it, right? So the movie, the film, is going to be hugely important to their bottom line as a studio house, right? So because you've got to get people to the theaters, you've got to get them paying for that film, and they could even make it, release it streaming simultaneously, and people will buy it there too. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Well,
in the it's same line, or
yeah, pretty much. About the only thing that I would amend to what you said is that, everything is accurate, except the other way they can gauge it, and where streaming does equal money when it comes to that, is the fact that how many people are subscribing because of a certain piece of content. So,
but how can you tell that?
Well, because they look at, and again, I'm not exactly sure of the pure mechanics of it. I know that they could track when a series or an episode or something released, and then it's You know, it just gains a bunch of subscribers. Now, I know it's a little bit more accurate than that because I remember them saying that The Mandalorian, and that's why they did it, The Mandalorian is actually what gave them their base subscribers. And when they were talking about some of the other series versus some of the Marvel series, they were somehow able to figure out, well, you know, who's subscribing because of WandaVision and who's subscribing because of the Book of Boba Fett.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
you know, so I mean,
that's
interesting.
Know,
how they do it, I don't know. How accurate it is, I don't know.
Right. Well, the only thing that makes me wonder about that is because if you look at my my subscription and the watch history that's on my account, it's basically Mickey Mouse because of my kids. Right, and all of the Disney princess movies. Oh, that's why Dave is subscribing because of all of the
you can be honest,
Disney
Dave.
content, not necessarily.
We won't tell anybody. We know, we understand.
But it's like I'm
kids
the
probably
only one
like,
really
Dad, again? Do we have to watch this?
Yeah, right.
But no,
they say that
right.
about Star Wars, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the other thing too, is that you have to have somebody, you know, sure, you're currently making billions of dollars, and this gets into the point too. You have to get somebody that's going to get the next generation into it, because while you do have a significant amount of young kids that are into Star Wars, there's a lot who aren't, more so than any of the other previous generations. Right. You know, it used to kind of be like, that was pretty much, you know, your rite of passage. When you're born, you know, you're basically given all your stuff, and the Star Wars thing, you're indoctrinated with it, and you become a Star Wars fan for life, and that's, you know, you're taught from the time you're a kid. This is good. Don't worry about why. I mean, because, you know, we're just trained that Star Wars is amazing, you know, and that's how it works.
Well, see, that's the thing too, though, is, and it's funny that you bring that up because, so like Eric, you know, you saw Star Wars 1977 and was released. You're in the theaters, you know, with your popcorn, you know, watching it happen, right? I didn't get into Star Wars until early 90s, well, probably late 80s, early 90s. So I got it as a birthday gift. You know, I got the trilogy, never even heard of Star Wars, but I only had 3 movies that I had to watch. Okay, I got the trilogy. Cool. Now everything else that proceeded after that, like the prequels and, you know, well, that succeeded, I should say, the prequels and everything like that. Okay, I was able to keep up with everything. And so now, yeah, when I'm watching, you know, all these different shows, like, okay, because I understand the whole flow of it from the beginning, I'm good with that. But the kids now, look how much content they have of that.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Where do you start?
Exactly, because now, and then especially for them, okay, now it goes back to that age-old question. Do you start with the prequels and then show them the originals, or do you show them the originals? Because you got to look at it. For them, looking at the original trilogy doesn't look as good. Even with the remastered version, it doesn't look as good as, you know, even the sequels. So their attention span to it is not going to be as good. With Marvel, though, even though these comics have been out for ages, like before any of us were born, right? Comic books or these superheroes have been like, okay, Marvel has been able to release all these different things, and they've had a formula. You know, they've released some things in phases, and it's been brilliantly done, at least up until phase 4, right where we are right now. Well, quite frankly, phase 4 is tanked, except for Wakanda Forever. I mean, really, most of the things that's come out in phase 4 is kind of, you know, depleting. So we even see it across the board, and that's still a Disney property too. So even the great mighty Marvel is starting to see like that fatigue, and people are kind of like, things aren't as good as they used to be. The quality is not as good, you know. And so we're starting to see that just with Disney, you know, in its entirety. So I think there's just a shift in the entertainment world where people are just looking at consuming things and they're like, okay. instead of just rushing things out because you're trying to make the dollar, and that's how you're judging success. Like Lucasfilm would look at Kennedy and like, oh, well, it made $1 billion. Psh, keep her, right? But it's like, no, it's because people are just going to see because they're hoping for good content, but eventually it's going, like you said, Eric, those holes in the ship are going to eventually start to
sink,
drag things. It's going to sink it because you're trying to rush and put out a bunch of content that's not really up to standard, the bar in which you already kind of set.
Well, and then to answer the question, because I never actually did answer the question, I just
that's true
went off to other things, right? That was the Disney Plus side that you brought up, Dave. So, but that was all in talking about the answer to the question is yes, the next film is going to probably decide the future of the franchise, to be honest. I mean, or at least let me put it this way. It'll decide the future of the franchise in film. Because Star Wars is still a theatrical experience. It is still designed to be a movie. Lucas basically designed it to be kind of those like Saturday afternoon matinee serial type things like Flash Gordon. In fact, the famous story is, now De Laurentiis ended up making the Flash Gordon film. Lucas tried to get the rights before him and lost out. It's because of that we got Star Wars. Because when Lucas lost the rights to make a Flash Gordon film, which was his dream, he was so bummed out that he basically said, well, all right, if I didn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, I will write and make my own Flash Gordon type film. And that became Star Wars. So this would have probably been a Flash Gordon podcast if we were, if he had gotten the rights. I don't know. But we're a little behind on these chats, so let's get back into the spirit of what we were probably talking about 20 minutes ago. Ronaldo says, that's a good point. Okay. But with George, Boba was a secondary villain. Now that he's a protagonist of a TV show, they decided to change him. And there's some truth to that. But I think you have to go back, though. See, those of us who are old enough to understand, it's funny because, and again, I am going to put the link to our holiday special review in the description of this video when it's done. Because y'all really should go check it out. But it was a holiday special. Ironically, that was the introduction of Boba Fett.
Yep.
People forget that.
In cartoon form.
Exactly. And you see how there was a few differences, but by and large, his personality was intact. Let's see. He says, I mean, when Lucas chose her, I guess we're talking about Kathleen Kennedy now. On paper, it was a great decision. Even with the bad things she's done, she's still a great producer. Which I actually have to go back now, Dave, because you, I don't know. You basically brought up that good point about the whole producer thing. Like,
right?
What did she really do?
E.T.
What do you actually do as
Jurassic Park?
Yeah, but what did she do? It's like Dave said. I mean, she's basically the secretary on, it's kind of like, but again, it goes to you though, Daryl, when you were talking about, but everybody reveres her. So, I mean,
yeah, if she was some hack or something like that. I mean, like, I don't think that she would have, I don't think she would have lasted this long.
Maybe she slept her way to the top, man. Maybe she was just really good,
Right.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there. Not gonna touch that one.
She done some other producing, I guess. Yeah. But look at this. I see what they did there. All right, cool.
See what happens when Dave comes on.
I know. We just act like we have no home training. But yeah, it's just
this is actually funny. This is hilarious because I thought that Ronaldo was talking about Cossey. He says, I think Dave needs to make a couple more TV episodes to get better in live action. And I'm thinking, he's kind of up on the live action, but he's talking about Filoni.
Not me. Filoni,
right. I'm there, guys. I'm all there. But I would agree with that. I mean, I said that he's ready, but I mean, I can see the idea, or maybe maybe take on it. But then again, I think a lot of what I was basing that on is I think he did most of Ahsoka. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure, at least more than anything else, he's done a lot on Ahsoka, and that's really where he's learned. Now, I should probably not make that statement until I see it.
That's his character, though, right?
He
created her.
He created her, yes.
It makes sense that he would do most of the work on that show, if not all of it. So
that's what I would think too. Okay, now Ronaldo, just so everybody's like ready on, because he's commenting on all these things we were talking about. Now he's talking about when we were talking about is the next movie important and all that stuff. Says, I think very important, but if the upcoming shows are as great as Andor, it'll be important, but not super important. What say you, Roundtable?
The council.
Well,
let's get Kathleen
Andor.
up there.
I love Andor, and personally, the next shows that come out have large shoes to fill because I'm absolutely in love with that show.
Well, it's no Visions, but
Why'd you got to bring up that? No.
So let me ask you this question, Dave. Since we haven't had a chance to talk to you in a while, what is it about Andor that you love about it so much? That's different. That makes it different from other Star Wars films or series.
So really, it kind of seems to me that the whole spy type of thing, espionage,
man, that's the word I was
jailbreak.
looking for.
Yeah, jailbreak type of stuff. It seems like that should have been a huge part of Solo. It seems like that's what Solo should have been. So they just translated what Solo should have been. I don't know if they actually did this or not. I'm just guessing, but and translated that over to Andor. And there's so much going on in Andor as well. And I think that with all of these different pieces that are moving simultaneously in Andor, you get to experience a lot of the universe that you haven't yet before. So there's the Imperial prison, right? And you get to see it's a labor prison. So you can kind of put the pieces together as to what was going on when even Death Star 2 was being built, right? And because there's always talk in the movies about slaves of different alien races and things like that were actually manufacturing these things for the Empire. So you get to see that. You get to see a more in-depth look into the ISB, which I find particularly intriguing just because I've been reading the Thrawn novels as well. So, and his kind of interaction with the ISB as well.
That was so good.
And just the how the rebellion was started, really, and how they had to operate in order to become what they were by the time of A New Hope. So, doing bad things for a good reason, I guess, and getting more in depth with that. I think that's the kind of thing that Rogue One was also doing. And it keeps in that same type of spirit of Rogue One as well.
Yeah, without question.
Okay.
Cool. Let's see what we got. Did I put this one? Oh, I think that's the biggest point. Kids can, I don't know, a lot more things to see now, especially. Oh, they have a lot more things to see now. Yeah, I mean,
yep.
With Marvel, and that's true. There's a lot more out there, I guess, that's kind of like Star Wars. Star Wars isn't really the only spectacle in town like it used to be. And so that is actually a very strong point. Not to mention all the content, right? All the streaming stuff, everything. I mean, you're bombarded by content every day. So,
yeah.
That's a good point. He also says, I think with Bob Iger back, it'll get better. Yeah, Iger's cleaning house. I mean, Chapek's lieutenant fired that person, let go of a bunch of people. There's rumors that, because Chapek was the one that actually brought Disney Plus from $6.99 to $10.99 or whatever it is. Well, Iger never wanted that to happen. He actually put it out at $6.99 on purpose. He wanted that to be the thing. So there's rumors that he might actually reverse that and put it back to the $6.99 price. So,
thank you.
Hey, Bob, can I get a refund?
yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
I paid for the yearly, man. I paid for the yearly.
And I did. You know what? I did the same thing. Mine just hit like a few days ago, like 2 or 3 days ago, and I'm like, ooh.
Ooh, yep.
It's like Bob Iger's back. You know, hey, maybe I could get old Bob to agree to do this show, and we can ask him. Yeah, that'll happen. So Ronaldo says, didn't Lucas try to get the rights to Lord of the Rings, and that's the reason he made Willow? I actually think that's true. So again, let's just hope that Lucas keeps failing at getting the rights to all this stuff, because then he decides, screw it, I'll just do my own version of it, and then he does it. It's awesome. Now, David comes back, and he's got a really good, compelling question that, and I've been pondering this myself. He says, do you think Star Wars should take a break and let it breathe, then return in maybe a year or two? Everything needs a vacation. That's a good question. So I'll start.
Go ahead.
It's funny because both you guys like took that inhale at the same time, like, ooh, cocked and loaded, baby.
Yeah.
It's like, slow your roll here. First? Let me just but I mean, well, what I'll do is I'll give like a really short answer for once and then let you guys go, because I'm really curious on what you guys are gonna say, because you could actually make the argument both ways. Now, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no because there is so much, especially once, like Dave, you and I, avid readers of the books, there is just so much content in Star Wars that you can do that I think, it's, and sure, there could be too much of a good thing, but at the same time, have you ever noticed that question in a franchise only comes up when people start getting disappointed in the content? Let's think about it. With Marvel, right? Yep. Daryl, you talked about Marvel fatigue that's setting in. And, I admit even with me it's setting in. But you know what? There was a time like 5 years ago or something, they're releasing like 2 or 3 Marvel films a year. Nobody was saying anything about Marvel fatigue back then because it was still good. Now that there's been, there's some series where it's like, I don't know. And here's another thing to keep in mind. I'm just trying to frame this discussion. Another thing to keep in mind is a lot of times when people say, a franchise needs a break. Well, maybe they should take a break. Maybe it would be more accurate to say you should take a break from watching it. If you're starting to feel fatigued on something, why have the people stop making the content? Just stop consuming it for a while. I mean, I get it, because anytime you see something new come out, you're like, oh, I got to check it out. But maybe, it's the only way that I would see that. The only way I would see it is if they wanted to regroup and maybe come back stronger. And they've sort of done that with the films. They're taking a break with the films. They even announced that. Kathleen Kennedy said, we're moving all of our release dates. We're going to take a break with the films and come back. In the meantime, they have all these Disney Plus shows. So that's kind of where I stand on it. What about you guys?
Daryl, go ahead.
I was going to let my guest go, but all right.
Yeah, Middle Brady has passed it to you, my friend.
So, a couple points. One, I think that sometimes when it's almost like a relationship. You take that like, oh, we need to take a break, and then that break just becomes like, okay, you get so used to the person not being around that you don't even miss them anymore. And I fear that that could happen with Star Wars. That's what I was
Mm-hmm.
making the point of earlier.
Yeah,
Is
like
that
how
if you
long of a
just
break though?
like how long of a break? Because out of sight, out of mind, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like events like, oh, Star Wars got something again. I guess I'll watch it, maybe. Because now you're into something completely new and some new trend has taken over, right? And I mean, you might be really into that. But the thing is, I think that, and I agree with you, Eric, on the first part that you said. I think it's just they need to just make better content because it's like you don't stop going to your favorite restaurant. You don't take a break from your favorite restaurant. Like you're always going to go there because the food is always there's a certain quality that you expect from certain restaurants, and you will always go back because the quality is going to be good. And I think that's what Star Wars, music, anything it should be. It's like if you constantly are putting out quality products, you have a loyal person for life. They're never going to go anywhere. And that's what built Star Wars, honestly.
Well, let me
That's
just
why Star Wars for so many years was like you couldn't touch it because the quality was so good
mm-hmm.
that it raised the bar in every way. And right now we're not raising the bar. We're just meandering along here.
Yeah, and I mean it would also, but I just want to break in for a second because when you brought up the restaurant analogy, what's cool about that is that a lot of times when people say, I need to take a break from this restaurant, it's like, no, you need to order something different at the restaurant. When you keep, because everybody has a tendency to keep ordering the same, dish every time they go to a particular restaurant and they go, I don't know if I want to go there. I think we should, take a break. I'm getting tired of it. It's like, no, go to the restaurant, but order a different dish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the same with Star, and that's why what Dave said not too long ago about Andor, and I think that's what got people like and Eric. We brought this up on our show numerous times about having different genres within Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you have a horror movie in Star Wars? It's a perfect venue for you. Got all these weird, freaky aliens running around. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, the Sarlacc pit alone is freaky. So I mean, you could do that. You can do, as we can see, you can do an espionage type movie. Solo was kind of like heist, supposed to be kind of a swashbuckling type thing. Okay, you have that. You could have the Acolyte is supposed to be more of a architecture, almost like an Indiana Jones, but exploring the dark side of the Sith type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a different type of vein that you go in as well. You can do political thriller. We talked about Claudia Gray. If you're really into politics and you really love the political landscape of things, Bloodline, that's a perfect book to do. So, like, there's tons of things, like you said, on the same restaurant as Star Wars, but you have different dishes you can select from.
And speaking of which, Ronaldo comes in defense and says, hey, Visions is amazing. And moving on to Ronaldo's, that's one way that
if you want me to be quiet, that's all you had to say.
Well, I will say, now if I really want to be quiet, I'd be like, hey, Visions is coming out, ready to do that second season review.
This whole little picture right here would just go black. Let me say.
It's like, I don't understand it. This is like the third time in a row we just lost his feed. And then Ronaldo goes on to say, I think it's been taking a break for a long time this couple of years. From the films, yeah. And I mean, for me, it's kind of funny because, and I'm sure you guys probably feel the same way, the Disney Plus shows have definitely lessened that, right? Especially something like Andor, which is so cinematic. You almost feel like you're just watching some of the movies at home,
Yeah. Well, that's why I was really anxious to see Rogue Squadron, because that's pretty much like Top Gun in space. Like,
there you go.
Well,
yeah,
it would have been
like it would have been at least, that's what I'm saying. Like those genres, like, okay, I can get into that. Like, okay, yeah, let me show you how X-Wing pilots are,
Mm-hmm.
uh
What was
training
intriguing to
and
me about that one is that it took place after episode 9. That was one of the most intriguing things to me about it. Because that would have been our first window into a post Rise of Skywalker world. So, and then of course, he says, I think that Kathleen Kennedy's decision to take a break was actually good. I mean, look at what happened with Terminator. And then he said, and as you said, it used to be only Star Wars. Even comic book movies were terrible back then. So, yeah, and that's true. Star Wars was kind of the top of the line. They did it right, kind of a thing, and then you didn't really have anything else. Now, David, of course, is bringing up yet another philosophical type of a thing. He says, should Star Wars have a definite conclusion, should it ever end? Or should it be like DC Marvel Comics in the sense that they keep making and rebooting comics?
Well, the thing with DC and Marvel is that it's not like you're following, a particular story. Like you
Ooh, can we get into the Batman? I had to do it.
Right now I can see David feverishly typing right now.
Feverishly typing, probably. I'm sorry, I opened a wound for David.
but yeah, like you have multiple characters and they have nothing to do with each other. So you could constantly keep releasing, Marvel and DC until to the end, because there's so many different characters you can go with. With Star Wars, it's not exactly like that though. It's a different kind of animal, and it's kind of you almost have to treat Star Wars as its own thing. And you have different eras, like the High Republic. That's an era we could talk about. You got, if you want to go all the way back to the Old Republic, you can do that. And then post. I mean, yeah, it can continuously go on, sure, because you can just keep creating new stories and new characters and things like that. So, I mean, my thing is, it should only end when you run out of things that you can do, stories that you can tell well. That's how I will put it.
And maybe not even a definite conclusion, right? You just stop making the movies or the shows. It's not like because you can't really wrap it up. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about Star Wars is it's this big, vast universe. You don't even have to reboot it, because Ronaldo here says, it should have a conclusion and then reboot. But it doesn't need to, because it's not a linear. I mean, it's linear in the sense of the Skywalker saga, but you could just jump parallel, focus on somebody else. Dave, let me ask you this, because I know you're reading the Thrawn trilogy. What about the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy? Have you touched that yet?
No, not yet.
That's really cool, because one of the things that demonstrates is you don't need anything familiar in Star Wars to make great Star Wars stuff. Because what happens is they end up focusing on the unknown regions, the Chiss. Thrawn is the only character from anything related to the franchise in it. It's all brand new. It's introducing brand new villains, brand new aliens, this whole other political system that has nothing to do with the Republic, and yet it feels just as Star Wars as the original trilogy does. You don't need to reboot it. All you need to do is just focus on a different, saga, I guess. Okay, we're not going to follow the Skywalkers now. We're going to do this.
Right. And like Daryl said, there's different eras that you can focus on too. That's what got me into, all of those, the video games, right? Because there's so much that you can do with those different eras. Eric, you and I were really big into the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic game.
Oh, man, yes.
And that was Star Wars, right? you were following a different set of characters because it was a completely different era, but it was still Star Wars. Everything was familiar.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think, going back to the question of should they take a vacation, I'm not sure a vacation is necessary. It seems, though, lately that the franchise has been focusing on one dish on their menu, which is the series, the streaming shows, and they could slow that down and then continue to diversify their offerings, right? So, but have a plan for the timing of when these things are going to come out and stick to it. Hold people's feet to the fire on deadlines. That's kind of what needs to happen, I think. But you could release a series of books in in a certain time frame. Then you could go maybe to comics that then focus on another type of story. Then you could do a streaming show that kind of takes off maybe from one of the comics or that book series to kind of enhance what's going on there. And then work on a video game, who knows, that kind of thing. Diversify the content that's being put out, and make it timely, but then they could back off a little bit. I don't think a complete, hey, we're just going to take a break for a while. I don't think that would be good for
right, with no content
for the
coming
franchise. Right.
Well, I'll tell you, the comics right now over the last year, phenomenal. When they came out with this War of the Bounty Hunter series, and then that's gone into like Crimson Dawn, Crimson Reign, or something like that. It's like they've actually been focusing multiple comics on the time period between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and how Crimson Dawn has come back up. And
okay,
Kira is, of course, the head of Crimson Dawn, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And how she's she was fighting Vader at one point. There's all this political stuff going on. She's got moles and everything inside the Empire. They're trying to get... She actually held an auction for Han Solo's carbonite frozen body that the Empire tried to bid on it. Jabba ended up stealing it. I mean, it's just like there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. And then Dorme, Padme's decoy or whatever, comes up. Yeah, she tries to come up, and she thinks that Vader killed Padme, so she's trying to get revenge. Then they sort of form an uneasy alliance. I mean, it's just, there's like so much that's going on in this comic series, and a ton of canonical stuff, because they'll reference it a lot of times in some of the books. They've referenced it throughout all these TV shows, actually. So, yeah, it's a really, really cool thing. And it, again, it's not anything to do with the films or the Disney Plus shows or anything like that. It's yet another source for great stories.
Right.
All right. So, final thoughts. I know, Dave, you're going to have to end up going pretty soon. Remember,
yep.
You had a hard stop at 10. So, I would say let's just get each of us to do some final thoughts on this whole Kathleen Kennedy situation and what your hopes are for the franchise moving forward. I don't know. Daryl, we can just, for the good of the order, right? We can just start with you.
Good of the order. All right. I'll just say, I appreciate what Kathleen has tried to do for Star Wars. I can't take that away from her. She has definitely tried to keep the franchise alive, and she has done. I mean, she has had some legitimate successes in that. However, I believe that her time has come where it's like, okay, she needs to pass that baton off to someone else who really can push the franchise into this next heights. And I just hope that they find someone really qualified to be a studio and really just define roles and really have a plan. Eric, we've been saying this for years now, but the plan is the key. You know, you have to bring someone in who really understands Star Wars and who has a plan, much like they did with Marvel, and then you have to just execute. And you have to just get the right people on board. You got Filoni there, who's a treasure trove of knowledge and information. He sat under Lucas and just really just work with that person to make us, make us have the best Star Wars content possible.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, I agree with Daryl. You know, she's done her best to keep things going in the franchise, and because there was a while there where in the Dark Ages, they called it, before the prequels even, that we were not sure if more Star Wars content was coming out. It was kind of revitalized with the prequels to an extent, and then she kind of took it from there. So I do appreciate that she's kept that going and brought on some really talented people to help with that. I do think that the next person needs to have an eye for Star Wars. They need to live and breathe this, right? I mean, I know that Lucasfilm is more than Star Wars, but that's the biggest franchise in that studio house, right? So they do need to have someone that's very Star Wars minded in that seat moving forward. So yeah, I think it's time to pass the ball to somebody else and let them run with it, but they need to be smart about how they run with it. Don't run into the defensive line and not get anywhere. Going back to a football analogy, but
sports,
you've got to see your route. You've got to see your route and run that route and run it well. So, yeah.
All right. Well, before we get to me, we got Ronaldo. He says she'll get fired. I think the biggest thing that I thank her is pairing Filoni with Favreau to start his training in live action. If Dave makes a Star Wars movie someday, it'll be because she made it happen. That's actually true because, and that's a good point that is worth mentioning in this, hey, let's all bag on Kathleen Kennedy's show tonight. We do have to look at some of the things that she did that was actually good, and that was one of them, is it pairing Filoni and Favreau and saying, to her credit, she said, look, you guys go and do your thing. And she really, there's been minimal interference from her when it comes to the shows, rightfully so. So I think that that's a really good thing. I think it's wonderful that she was able to do this, but I agree with everybody else. So Doug had been texting me tonight, right? First he wanted to know why Andor was on ABC. Oh, this is a great line from the robot chicken thing, isn't it?
I can't exactly see the lower third, but I see is what the hell is an aluminum
Falcon? Yeah, that was, I think, a line from the
that's our
favorite
ever robot chicken episode.
Ever robot chicken episode. That's which, I mean, that episode is comedy gold. Comedy gold. Doug said yes. Because it's like that is hands down.
The Emperor going off on Vader for losing the Death Star is absolutely priceless. Like,
said he could protect it from a bunch of teenagers or something like that. I mean, that was just, see, if anything, that's what we should have done a reaction to if we were going to do something. Ronaldo says, the next person is a fan that's good, but I just hope that someone that knows how to make a plan and work with the directors in a good way. Well, with that said, I mean, who do you think it should be? It's kind of
I propose a trifecta, the three of us.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
That would be. Well, I mean, it
Yes.
would definitely be a pay increase, maybe.
Right? No, it would be.
Too bad. Too bad. Malay over.
See, that's what we got to do. We just go to Bob Iger and say, "Listen, I know you guys don't know us, but trust us. We can actually
big
make this
deal.
better." Yeah.
I should do the whole Finn thing. I'm kind of a big deal.
Yeah, right. Oh, he says, I disagree with King David. The actual guy from the Bible, or Cossey? I don't think she did her best. I was gonna say, man, wrong show.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I said she did her best, but
I think she wants to be an influencer.
She did some things okay.
Star Wars is a huge pulpit to preach from. Hey, there we go.
There you go.
Oh man.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, it's kind of one of those things too where you really don't know. When you're the one that's actually in the hot seat and you're the one, again, it's easy for us to, I mean, now it almost sounds like I'm being an apologist for this, but it seems like there's a lot that's riding on it. And my biggest problem, this is going to tie in because I haven't given my final thoughts on this yet. It sort of ties in with what David's saying. And it also ties in with our own King David and what you were saying, Dave. And that is that essentially the biggest misstep that she made that was like a domino effect that affected the entire franchise and is the singular cause of all that has gone wrong is no plan. No plan in place. Each of the second, it's like, okay, they came up with the idea for The Force Awakens, and then it became like a choose-your-own-adventure thing. Yeah, we'll just let the next director figure out where we go from there. And then the next one can figure out where we go from there. And you don't make Star Wars like that.
No.
You need to have, exactly, you need to have that plan in place. And this is why the High Republic has been, I mean, for a book and comic series, it's been pretty successful, is because you had all these writers get together and just come up with a framework. And then they all decided, okay, well, who's going to fill this stuff in? And yes, there's some liberties that you can take. You can, you had the framework and you can fill in the gaps or whatever and connect different threads. But the point is you have a plan. If they had just sat in a room with everybody that was supposed to direct, which would have been Abrams, Johnson, and Trevorrow, with the story group, with Kathleen Kennedy, gone to like a retreat and basically hashed out the entire story and a framework like, okay, this movie has to start here and end here. Now, what you do in between, we can play around with that a little bit, but it's got to start here, it's got to get to here, and then it's got to end here. And you do that with each of the films. You would have actually had a little bit better. Now, I'm not saying that she would have handled everything perfectly, but a lot of what did happen would not have happened if they hadn't made that critical mistake. And you don't do that with the sequel trilogy.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty big, once you botch that up, now what's going to have to happen is you got all these guys, and that's what they're doing. If you really look and pay attention to what they're doing with this series, I should say all the Disney Plus shows, they're kind of doing a soft reboot. They're slowly kind of rebooting around. So it's not necessarily going to replace the sequel trilogy. It's just going to nullify it. You can sort of move around it. Let's get these last couple of comments from Ronaldo. He says, if you guys become Lucasfilm presidents, remember who's your number one fan. Absolutely. Hey, right there with you, buddy. Well, look, Ronaldo will put you on the story group. He says, I'll make a prediction. Kevin Feige will replace her. Ah, that's a good one, because that was another thing that I was saying that we should all chime in on who should replace her. I would... He is a Star Wars fan.
True.
All right, well, what do you guys think?
I don't know. I mean, I have to think about
Yeah,
that.
that's yeah.
You guys are cheapening out on me. It's
No,
like-
I mean,
no, you know
there
what?
would
You,
be
yeah, you don't want to throw names out there just because.
right. No, exactly, because there would be some names thrown out, and it's like, okay, well, but they're really more of a creative person than they are, somebody who's able to run a studio. I mean, come on. So
It's true.
that's the only reason why, because there's so much weight to it, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to throw out somebody's name and yeah. Anyway.
Well, there's some people, honestly, that are pulling a Bob Iger thing and saying Lucas should just run it kind of as an interim guy until they can get somebody in place. Because, the temptation, Dave, and this is kind of what you were saying, the temptation would be to say, Filoni. But
exactly.
he's good creatively.
That's what I was
but
thinking
can he,
of.
But can he run a studio?
Exactly. Right.
And that is true. That is a very good point. So, I don't know. It's something that we're going to all have to ponder. But unfortunately, we're all going to have to let you guys go to enjoy if... David said the Fast and Furious director should take over. Great modern-day franchise. Anyway, so, we'll leave you guys. We hope that, if you're in the United States, where we're all celebrating Thanksgiving tomorrow, we hope you guys enjoyed our Thanksgiving special roundtable type of a thing. Let us know in the comments section, what do you guys think of this possible news that it looks like Kathleen Kennedy is going to, if not be fired, maybe be firmly influenced to step down? Let us know in the comments section. If you haven't already hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, of course, if you like what you see. We are on every Monday and Friday live at 8 o'clock. Aw, Doug's like, I love you too. Click.
So Doug.
And Ronaldo says thank you for bringing Obi-Wan to the show. Yeah, we want to thank our own little Obi-Wan, Dave Cossey, for coming on tonight, as he does every year. And
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And look, unlike most years, because usually we'll do this little Thanksgiving special on, the day before Thanksgiving, and then that's it. We enjoy the holiday weekend. We're not going to do that this year. Daryl and I are going to be back live Friday night at 8 because, hey, we've got the season finale of Andor that we got to review. We can't let you guys down. So, after you guys are done shopping, I mean, those of you who are standing in line somewhere at 4 a.m., might be getting a little tired by 8 o'clock, but you know what? Kick back, relax after you guys have shopped all day and, check us out. So with that, wow, we got like a triple kind of a thing. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And I'm Dave Cossey.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.